cuts them with a machete, then completes the bloody job, and finally beheads the victim. Several of the killers then hold up gang signs, while one holds the bloody hatchet in front of the camera. The bloody head then helps the camera. The video ends. These days, it takes a lot to shock me, but this video was especially bad. The captive's prolonged suffering is dreadful. I have no idea.
Struggling in silence? We hear you. Call, text, or chat 988.
Welcome back to the stern reality. When it comes to Mexican drug cartels, certain names are synonymous with the illicit trade. From the likes of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Amado Fria Fuentes, Rafa Carlos Vivero, to Nemesio Osiguera Cervantes, along with many more. These are just some of the individuals that have become the face of the war on drugs post Pablo Escobar. So the reality is, one name that is rarely mentioned when it comes to being a transformational figure within the trade would be Arturo Guzman de Seda, aka Z1, a man who was instrumental in the birth of the most infamous and violent armed wing in cartel history. Of course, we are talking about Los Zetas, who would eventually go on to become their own independent cartel, becoming arguably one of, if not the most violent criminal enterprise that Mexico and even the world has ever seen. Today, however, we will explore the life and death of one of the most influential but under-the-radar figures in cartel history, the original Zeta, Arturo Guzman de Seda. Arturo Guzman de Seda was born on the 13th of January 1976 in the state of Puebla, Mexico. Arturo was born in a poor rural town and spent his early years growing up in poverty. His parents struggled to make ends meet, but they managed to get Arturo into school, and Arturo completed both middle and high school. Arturo's father was said to be extremely strict, and he insisted that his son join the army to essentially get a job for life and to make something of himself. Arturo Guzman de Seda signed up to join the army just after turning 16 years old in 1992. It was immediately apparent that Arturo had found his calling. He breezed through basic training and became a full member of the Mexican army. He quickly impressed his superiors due to his work ethic, aggression, and his willingness to complete any set objective, regardless of the challenge. Arturo was a cut above the average military personnel, and he was handpicked to be recruited for a position in the elite Mexican military group called the Cuerpo de Fuerzas Especiales de Mexico, in English, the Special Forces Airmobile Group, also known as GAPE. GAPE, formed in 1990, are an elite group of the Mexican military, and in the 90s, they were specialists in combat with paramilitary forces, as well as combating against trafficking groups. Despite this operational success, GAPE, now known as the Special Forces Corps, has faced criticism for possible abuses during its interventions, but it remains one of the most respected and strategic forces for Mexico's security. While still a teenager, Arturo Guzman de Seda received a myriad of training under the GAPE unit, including in the areas of counterinsurgency, explosives, espionage, torture, jungle and urban warfare, sniper training, heavy weaponry, and even psychological warfare. During his time in the GAPE unit, it's believed that de Seda also received special training from both US and Israeli special forces. At just 18 years old, in 1994, Arturo Guzman de Seda would get to put his training to the test when he was deployed in the state of Chiapas, in the Sierra Leone region, with the task of annihilating the Zapatista Army of National Liberation and their attempted uprising. The rebellion was a symbolic uprising against poverty and the one-party rule of the Institutional Revolutionary Party. For context, the EZLN's ideology has been characterized as libertarian socialist, anarchist or Marxist, and having roots in liberation theology, although the Zapatistas have rejected this political classification. The EZLN aligns itself with the wider anti-globalization and anti-neoliberal social movements, seeking indigenous control over local resources, especially land. In January of 1994, an estimated 3,000 armed Zapatista insurgents seized 6 towns and cities in the Chiapas highlands, and as a result, the GAPE unit was sent in to combat the Zapatistas. Going into battle, Arturo was imbued with the mindset that the indigenous people of the region were filthy, lazy, and nothing more than thugs that had to be put down. And this level of dehumanization led to horrific crimes against humanity in this brief conflict. Within hours of the GAPE unit arriving in the conflict zone, 34 rebels were killed and 3 others were captured by Guzman de Sena's counterinsurgency group. Their bodies were then dug from the bank of a river, their ears and noses cut off, to send a message to the rebels. This type of tactic draws parallels to what we see today from drug cartels. After a few days, the Zapatistas' attempted uprising was countered effectively by the Mexican military, big part in due to the violent actions of the GAPE unit. Around this time, despite his young age, Guzman de Sena was made a lieutenant. After the conflict in Chiapas, Arturo Guzman de Sena took up a role in the Federal Judicial Police, who worked closely with the GAPE unit to crack down on drug traffickers. For context, the Federal Judicial Police, also known as the PJF, was the Federal Police Force of Mexico until it was shut down in 2002 due to its rampant corruption and criminal activity. At some point during the mid-90s, Arturo was sent to the northern state of Tamaulipas, where he landed the role of head of security in the city of Miguel Alman. In this role, he was instructed to crack down on violence committed by trafficking gangs such as the Gold Cartel. Around 1997, Arturo Guzman de Sena had made contact with the Gold Cartel, and initially he was paid bribes by the cartel in order for them to be able to see their merchandise through the So at this point, Arturo just appeared to be a corrupt official, nothing new or nothing special. At some point in 1997, it's believed that Arturo Guzman de Sena met a man named Zeferina Peña Cuellar, aka Don Zefe, who at the time worked for the police and, like Arturo, was taking bribes from the Gold Cartel, though Don Zefe was far more involved in organized crime. In fact, in 1999, 2 years later, he was appointed as the police chief in Miguel Alman, and while in this position, he used his authority to use military personnel to conduct drug trafficking operations on behalf of Cartel del Golfo. It's believed that Arturo and Don Zefe struck up a friendship in 1997, and at this point, Arturo was introduced to Ociel Cardenas, and as they say, the rest is history. Once Arturo had met Ociel Cardenas, he abandoned his military position and began to work full-time in organized crime. Of course, I'd say it's safe to assume that Arturo's main motive was a bigger paycheck, but possibly that may have not been his only motive. Around 1997, Mexico was undergoing political change. The country was transitioning to becoming more democratic, and the role of the PRI party was beginning to show cracks. Many soldiers and ex-soldiers at the time feared the change in regime, as potentially a new regime may have re-examined previous conflicts, such as the 1994 Chiapas conflict, and then possibly even made arrests based on crimes against humanity. Simultaneously, families of those killed in Chiapas were making noise, launching numerous protests for justice in Mexico City that were garnering more and more attention. Around this time, some military officers were also beginning to be found guilty in court martials for corruption and even war crimes.
The attack on camp could be the last thing you ever do.
Some theorize that Arturo Guzman de Sena was worried that he may be tried for his conduct in Chiapas, as well as his corruption in Tamaulipas. So he figured he'd be better off making his money outside the system in organized crime, Shortly after meeting Arturo, Oscar Cardenas asks Arturo to help him recruit and set up the most ferocious hitman possible for his cartel. Mexican federal agents later released a conversation between the two after an informant passed on the information. A snippet of the conversation goes as follows. Oscar Cardenas, I want the best men, the best. Guzman de Sena replies, what type of people do you need? Oscar responds, the best armed men that there are. Guzman de Sena replies, these are only in the army. Oscar states, I want them. Following the orders from Oscar Cardenas, Arturo Guzman de Sena spent the next few months recruiting members of the Mexican armed forces to join the Gulf Cartel. Some media outlets have reported that the formation of Los Zetas was the result of a mass defection of a single army unit, but military records show that this claim is false and inaccurate. The soldiers left their ranks and joined Los Zetas over a period of a few months, and were from several different military units, but a large portion of the defectors were Gafe soldiers. After 3 or 4 months, Arturo Guzman de Sena had managed to persuade 38 members of the Mexican military to defect and join the Gulf Cartel under the persuasion of better pay. Among the initial Zetas were the ultra-violent Heriberto Lascano, Rogelio Gonzalez Cristiana, and Oscar Guerrero Silva. The members were given a code name with the letter Z, starting with Guzman de Sena being Z1. Z1 was apparently the radio code of Guzman de Sena in the army. Some of the Gafe deserters even stole army equipment employed in the Gulf Cartel, such as machine guns, assault rifles, pistols, rocket launchers, grenades, and even telecommunications and surveillance equipment. Initially, the Zetas were used as bodyguards for the high-ranking Gulf Cartel leaders, mainly Oscar Cardenas, though they were also used for specialist covert missions. At the time, when the original Zetas joined the Gulf Cartel were in a place of uncertainty due to the arrest of longtime Gulf Cartel leader Juan Garcia Abreu in 1996, and as a result, a power vacuum was left at the top of the organization, with several high-ranking capos vying for the position of leader. By the time 1997 rolled around, the two with the most power and influence within Cartel del Golfo were Oscar Cardenas and Angel Salvador Gomez Herrera, aka El Chava, and they both intended to take control of the Gulf Cartel together in partnership. From the outside looking in, it appeared that the two worked well together. They bribed police officers, bribed politicians and soldiers, and managed to take control of important drug shipments arriving from Guatemala. However, the relationship between Oscar and El Chava was not as rosy as it appeared. Behind the scenes, Oscar began to present El Chava with his apparent manipulative personality, as well as his constantly requesting money loans from Oscar. This type of behavior from El Chava was starting to get to Oscar Cardenas, and he soon began to view El Chava as expendable and as a liability. By mid-1999, Oscar had enough of El Chava and devised a plan to get him out of the picture and take control of the Gulf Cartel for himself. Oscar had invited El Chava to the christening ceremony of his daughter, and El Chava turned up with smiles and enjoyed the celebrations. After the ceremony, Oscar invited Angel Salvador Gomez Herrera, the godfather of his daughter, for a ride in his Dodge Durango. El Chava accepted. While driving, the pair exchanged laughter and talked for several minutes. Arturo Guzman de Sena, who was travelling in the back seat with the pair, then fired a bullet into the back of Gomez Herrera's head. Investigators later found Herrera's decomposing body on the outskirts of the city of Matamoros in Tamaulipas. Killing Gomez Herrera, Cardenas Weird earned his nickname Mata Amigos, Friend Killer, and Guzman de Sena became Oscar's closest ally. For the next 3 years, Arturo Guzman de Sena commanded the group within the Gulf Cartel, now known as Los Zetas. Initially, they offered protection to the boss Oscar, conducted sophisticated assassinations, and also started to recruit and grow in size. They soon became instrumental in the Gulf Cartel's ability to acquire new territory and wage war on rival gangs, as at the time, other cartels did not have armed wings as sophisticated and as trained as the Zetas. By the early 2000s, Gulf Cartel were arguably the biggest criminal organization in Mexico, and it was largely due to the help of the Zetas, commanded by Z1, Arturo Guzman de Seda. However, at just 26 years old, Arturo Guzman de Seda would live his last day on November 22nd, 2002. There are numerous stories of what happened that day, but the most agreed upon version is as follows. On the 22nd of November 2002, Arturo Guzman de Seda went to a restaurant in Matamoros and enjoyed himself, allegedly partaking in a few strong drinks as well as a few lines of coke. He then decided to visit one of his flings, Ana Berta Gonzalez, who lived just a few blocks away. In order not to be disturbed, Arturo reportedly ordered his Zeta soldiers to block the street and redirect traffic. However, one of the neighbors called an anti-organized crime hotline that then called the Mexican army. The soldiers subsequently arrived and ambushed de Seda, shooting him dead. After his death, flowers were placed in front of the restaurant where he last ate, as well as on his grave. According to reports, one of the bouquets of flowers contained a note that read the following: "You will always be in our hearts. On behalf of your family, Los Zetas." Memorials also popped up in and around territories of Los Zetas dedicated to Arturo. Following the death of Z1, 4 members of the Attorney General Office were kidnapped and murdered near Reynosa, Tamaulipas in early 2003, allegedly by members of Los Zetas in an act of revenge. Less than 4 months after the death of Arturo, his boss, Osiel Cardenas, was also arrested by the Mexican military. The Zetas' second-in-command, Rogelio Gonzalez Pisiana, aka Z2, then took charge of the group following Arturo's death, though Gonzalez was captured himself in October of 2004, leaving Z3, Heriberto Lascano, to take control of the Zetas. From here, the rest is history. Under the leadership of Heriberto Lascano and later Miguel Trevino Morales, the Zetas became the most infamous drug gang in Mexico and possibly even the world, dominating large parts of Mexico with pure brutality. They pioneered the paramilitarization of drug cartels and the extreme levels of hyper-violence that we still see to this very day. The Zetas by 2010 became so big and powerful that they no longer needed the Gulf Cartel, and with Osiel Cardenas now extradited to the USA, they broke away and went to war with the Golfos. The conflict would go on to leave thousands of people dead, becoming the most bloodiest war in Mexican cartel history. Truth be told, the war decimated both the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas. The Gulf Cartel began to splinter and fracture by 2015, no longer being a united and cohesive organization, whereas the Zetas were also decimated by the capture of its leaders. The Zetas by 2015 would also fracture and essentially split into 2 different factions: Cartel del Noreste, in English the Northeast Cartel, and Los Zetas Vieja Escuela, the old school Zetas. The killing of Arturo Guzman de Seda marked the Mexican government's first victory over Los Zetas. In regards to the death of Arturo, there have been rumors that have been circulated for many years, suggesting that Arturo was set up and ratted out by his own boss, Osiel Cardenas, who throughout his tenure as Gulf Cartel leader was known to be extremely paranoid, which was further fueled by his heavy cocaine use. One of the alternative stories to Arturo's death is that he was actually killed by his own men under the orders of Osiel Cardenas, as Cardenas recognized Arturo as a leader, and as a result viewed him as a threat to his hegemony as cartel boss. How true this is, who knows? Despite dying at the young age of 26 years old and never being an official cartel leader, Arturo Guzman de Seda, aka Z1, transcended his industry and pioneered the 21st century paramilitarization of Mexican drug cartels. His name is nowhere near as recognizable as the likes of El Chapo, or even high-ranking hitmen such as El Chino Antrax, though his legacy is just as bloody and his influence is still being felt to this day. That was the life and death of the original Zeta, a soldier turned narco mercenary, Arturo Guzman de Seda. aka Z1.
Attention shoppers, want to spend less? Go to Aldi. Number one in everyday low prices.
Welcome to Hollywood Radio. There's a club out there whose membership boasts some of the biggest names in music, art, and entertainment. It's a highly exclusive club, one that people are dying to get into, but that no one ever aspires to be a part of. It's known as the 27th Club. It consists of notable figures in the entertainment world who all died tragically young, at the age of 27. The idea of the 27th Club originated with musicians in the 70s like Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, but has since come to encompass celebrities from all walks of life, including actors, artists, sports figures, etc. And while there is no statistical evidence to support the notion that stars die at a greater rate at age 27 than the average, the idea has seeped its way into the public consciousness, reflected in literature, art, and music.
Hoping not to join the 27 Club.
Join us today as we remember members of the 27th Club by visiting their final resting places. We begin our journey today teaming up with fellow YouTuber Necro Tour to travel back to the 1800s and down to Sao Paulo, Brazil, to find one of the very first members of the 27th Club. Alexander Levy certainly wasn't the first musician in a long history of musicians to die at age 27, but he is likely the first famous musician of some international notoriety to die at this age, and is therefore considered by many as the 27 Club's inaugural member. Alexander Levy was a Brazilian composer and pianist who showed remarkable talent from a very young age, contemporary critics comparing him to Mozart. He began performing at age 8 and publishing compositions in Europe as a teenager. He was known for combining classical music with Brazil's folk and popular music and rhythms. Some of his best-known works are inscribed here on his tomb, like Sweet Brazilian. On January 17, 1892, Levy complained of feeling ill and died a short time later, his cause of death being reported as cerebral congestion and cardiac arrest. To this day, a prestigious music award is granted in Brazil in the name of Alexander Levy. To find the first known American member of the 27th Club, we head to St. Louis, Missouri. This is Calvary Cemetery, where rests legendary ragtime musician Louis Chauvin, who is known as the king of ragtime players. There are no recordings of him playing, but he's remembered by his peers as an exceptionally gifted performer and composer. He published works including Heliotrope Bouquet with Scott Joplin, which you're listening to right now. The tune can be heard in the 1983 film The Sting 2 and the 1977 biopic Scott Joplin, in which Chauvin was portrayed by Clifton Davis. Chauvin's cause of death in 1908 was listed as multiple sclerosis, probably syphilitic, and starvation.
Syphilitic.
We make our first trip to Hollywood today at Calvary Cemetery in East LA. In these grounds rests an actress known as one of Hollywood's first movie stars of Hispanic descent. Meet Myrtle Gonzalez. She began her career as a singer here in Los Angeles before moving into silent pictures in 1913. She appeared in some 80 films between 1913 and 1917 for studios such as Vitagraph and Universal, and was once described as the virgin white lily of the screen. She would appear a number of times alongside William Desmond Taylor, like in 1914's The Kiss. But Myrtle's life and career were cut short when she became a victim of the 1918 flu pandemic, which took the lives of some 50 million people worldwide. In the Mississippi Delta, there's a legend of a man who sold his soul to the devil at the local crossroads in order to achieve musical success. Whether or not this supernatural transaction ever actually took place, Robert Johnson would indeed become immortal for his music. This is Louis Zion M.B. Church Cemetery in Greenwood, Mississippi. Near the base of an old pecan tree, we find the grave of Robert Johnson. He is considered the king of Mississippi Delta blues. Robert Johnson took up the guitar as a teenager, taking lessons from Ike Zimmerman in the local cemetery where he could practice and restore. His prodigious skill seems to come quite out of nowhere, giving rise to the legend that he sold his soul to the devil at the local crossroads at midnight in exchange for musical prowess. He traveled and performed extensively as an itinerant musician in the early 30s, and in 1936-37 made a number of important recordings, including Me and the Devil Blues,
Me and the devil. Ooh, we're walking side by side.
and Crossroad Blues, now Blues Central.
I went to the crossroads. Down on me.
But Johnson would never know the extent of his musical success and impact during his life. He died at the age of 27 on August 16, 1938, with no official cause of death recorded. His music and legend only grew thereafter, as he would influence the next generation of musicians that became the fathers of rock and roll, like Chuck Berry. Johnson is sometimes described as the grandfather of rock and roll, and he's since been inducted into numerous halls of fame, including the Blues and Rock and Roll Halls of Fame. The myth of Robert Johnson has even been interpreted on screen a number of times. There is some ambiguity, though, about where exactly Robert is buried. A few miles south of here, in the graveyard of Mount Zion Church, is another Robert Johnson grave. This obelisk was placed in 1990 by Columbia Records and the Mount Zion Memorial Fund. That same year, a third monument to Johnson was placed at Main Chapel in nearby Keene, with the inscription Resting in the Blues. Both of these other sites are generally considered cenotaphs, though, and the site at Little Zion where we began is thought to be his most likely to find resting place. The next stop brings us back home to Los Angeles and Evergreen Cemetery. Here in Section G, we find the grave of Jesse Belton. As a songwriter, Belton co-wrote one of the biggest hits of the 50s, Earth Angel, performed by the band.
Earth angel, earth angel, will you be mine?
The song's popularity resurged in the 80s when it was used in Back to the Future. He was also a talented singer and performer in his own right, with hits like Good Night, My Love. His life and career were cut short, however, just after a 1960 performance in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was the very first concert in the history of that town played before an integrated audience. The concert was interrupted several times by white supremacists shouting racial epithets. Shortly after finishing the performance, Belton and his wife were killed in a head-on collision as they drove to the Polk office. According to state troopers, the tires of their car had been tampered with. Jesse was 27 and his wife 22. Let's cross the pond now and head back to England. This is Cheltenham Cemetery, where we find a name familiar to you fans of the Rolling Stones. Brian Jones was a rock musician, a guitar player, and founding member of the highly influential rock band, the Rolling Stones, which formed in 1962. He would help craft the style that would become the sound of the Rolling Stones. And it was Brian who gave the band its name. As a talented multi-instrumentalist, he brought unique tones to the Stones, like the sitar in Painted Black. But in the years that followed, Jones became disillusioned with the direction of the band and saw his influence diminish. He left the group in 1969, and within a month was dead, found at the bottom of a swimming pool, drowned at the age of 27. He was reportedly buried 10 to 12 feet deep to prevent exhumation by trophy hunters. Future members Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison both paid tribute to Jones after his death. We continue our exploration of the history of the 27 Club at Sequoia National Park, where the ashes of Alan Blind Owl Wilson were scattered after his death in 1970 at the age of 27. Blind Owl was a rock and blues musician, best known today for co-founding and fronting the band Canned Heat. The group formed in 1965 with Wilson as singer, guitar, and harmonica player and principal songwriter. Among their biggest hits are On the Road Again and growing up the country. The band would perform at legendary festivals like Monterey Pop Festival and Woodstock. In September 1970, Wilson was scheduled to leave for Germany for a European tour, but he missed his flight, and on September 3rd was found dead in his sleeping bag on a hill in Topanga Canyon. His death was ruled an accidental barbiturate overdose. Blind Owl Wilson was also a passionate conservationist and fought to preserve the environment, so his ashes were scattered here amongst the giant redwoods he loved so much. Turning the compass north, we make our way to the Seattle area. This grand monument found at Greenwood Memorial Park is to one of rock's most legendary guitarists, Jimi Hendrix. He's considered popular music's most influential electric guitar figure. Some of his early hits came out of his time in the UK with the band The Jimi Hendrix Experience, including Purple Haze. Back in the US, he made a splash with audiences at the Monterey Pop Festival, playing the guitar with his teeth and setting his guitar on fire. His third album, Electric Ladyland, reached #1 on the US charts. He pioneered many sounds and effects on guitars still used today, like overdriven amps, guitar feedback, and tone-altering effects. By 1969, Hendrix was the world's highest-paid rock musician. That year, he headlined the Woodstock Music Festival, where he famously performed the Star Spangled Banner on the electric guitar. Only 1 year after that legendary performance, Hendrix would be dead. On the morning of September 18, 1970, while in London, his girlfriend found him unresponsive. He was transported to the hospital where he was pronounced dead of apparent asphyxia while intoxicated. For the next 3 decades, he had a single grave here in Renton, until 2002 when construction began on this grand gazebo monument, which features murals, lyrics from his songs, and of course, an electric guitar. Just weeks after Jimi Hendrix died, another of the biggest names in popular music was found dead, Janis Joplin. She has no grave, so we'll remember her on the shores of the Pacific Ocean where her ashes were scattered. Janis Joplin was one of the most widely known and successful rock stars of the 60s, known for her mezzo-soprano voice and electric stage presence. She rose to fame following a performance at the Monterey Pop Festival with the psychedelic rock band Big Brother and the Holding Company. She'd then go on to find success as a solo artist, including appearing at Woodstock. She had a number of tracks hit the charts, including covers of Me, Bobby McGee, and Piece of Mind. Janis died of a heroin overdose on October 4th, 1970, in room 105 of the Landmark Motor Hotel, now the Highland Gardens Hotel here in Hollywood. Janis was cremated at Westwood Village Memorial Park, her ashes scattered from the plain here on East Dixon Beach. The following summer, more tragic news would rock the music world, this time coming from Paris. We're at Père Lachaise Cemetery, where we find the grave of Jim Morrison, legendary singer and frontman of the rock band The Doors. The band formed in Venice, California in 1965, would soon embody the rebellious counterculture of youth in that era. They shot to fame with their song Light My Fire. Other hits include Break On Through to the Other Side, Riders on the Storm, and my favorite Doors song, People Are Strange.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone.
With his wild and unpredictable personality, unique voice, and poetic lyrics, Morrison would become one of the most influential frontmen in the history of rock. In 1971, Morrison was living in Paris with his girlfriend, Tamara. On the morning of July 3rd, he was found dead in the bathroom. His cause of death has been shrouded in mystery since no autopsy was performed. The official cause of death being listed as heart failure. The area surrounding Jim's grave here is fenced off due to pervasive vandalism and trash piles that would accumulate around his grave from the fans. There was even once a bust of Morrison on his tombstone above that mistake. The current marker features a Greek inscription which translates as true to his own spirit. It was the culmination of all these big music names dying at the age of 27 between 1969 and 1971 that gave birth to the idea of the 27 Club. But whether a curse or a coincidence, let's stop there.
That
right there is the sound of deliciousness.
And cue mouthwash. Moving into 1973, we're up in Palo Alto, California, at Alta Mesa. Here's one for you deadheads, Ronald Pigpen. He was a singer and instrumentalist, the founding member of the legendary San Francisco counterculture band, the Grateful Dead. The psychedelic band fused elements of rock, blues, folk, and country with performances that are often improvisation. A jam band. Pigpen sang in the band and played harmonica and keyboards. By his mid-20s, Pigpen's alcohol abuse began to affect his health. And in 1973, he was found dead from a gastric intestinal hemorrhage, joining the others in the ill-fated 27. In 1994, he was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. 3 years after the death of Jim Morrison, his partner Pamela would join him in the 27th Club. While never officially married, Pamela Corson is often called
Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. Throughout the last several decades, when it comes to election season in America, a hot topic of contention has been border security as well as the war on drugs. Usually, the issue has been used as a cheap talking point to sway voters, though once said political party wins power, regardless of side, none have seemed to be able to get a grasp on the problem surrounding the drugs trade. In recent years, overdose deaths due to the killer drug fentanyl have become a huge talking point in American mainstream media, with various solutions being touted by both Democrats and Republicans. One idea that frankly has been floating around Washington for several years would be that of designating drug cartels as terrorist organizations. Following Donald Trump's inauguration on the 20th of January 2025, Donald Trump signed an executive order which, in essence, would designate certain cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This does not only include Mexican cartels, but also Venezuelan gangs, such as Tren de Aragua, as well as the Honduran gang, MS-13, despite MS-13 being founded in America. Naturally, this decision has caused much debate online, and of course I have my own opinions on the matter. But I think first and foremost, we should explore both the positive and negative effects of this executive order, instead of playing the bipartisan lowest common denominator left versus right game. Let's talk about the potential positives of this executive order. Firstly, and I believe this to be the most positive aspect, US agencies could gain more legal and financial tools to combat cartels. For instance, a terrorist designation allows for freezing assets, increased surveillance, and imposing sanctions on entities or individuals supporting the cartels. Banks and financial institutions would also have to face stricter obligations to monitor and report transactions linked to cartels, potentially cutting off their revenue stream and making money laundering harder. Foreign entities that support cartels may also face legal action or sanctions, reducing international arms trafficking and money laundering linked to these groups. The designation could pressure the Mexican government to enhance its anti-cartel measures and improve bilateral collaboration in combating drug trafficking and organized crime. And finally, labeling cartels as terrorist organizations could increase public awareness of the severity of the cartel-related violence and the opioid crisis, potentially mobilizing more resources and public support. though there are also potential drawbacks to this new designation, such as straining political relations with Mexico. Mexico may view this designation as an infringement on its sovereignty, leading to tensions between the two nations. Historically, the Mexican government has consistently opposed such a move. Furthermore, the US could justify unilateral military actions under counter-terrorism policies, which might lead to conflict within Mexico and damage bilateral relations further. Increased US actions against the cartels could also lead to harsher retaliatory violence from cartels in Mexico, exacerbating the suffering of civilians in already affected regions. Sanctions and financial freezes could inadvertently affect legitimate businesses and individuals in Mexico, harming the economy and possibly driving more people towards criminal activity for survival. An area in which few have considered would also be the albeit small possibility of cartels escalating violence against US interests, citizens, or infrastructure in retaliation for their designation as terrorist organizations, and the measures that go along with that. Lastly, one area where I have concern in regards to this designation would be the risk that we are in fact diluting terms and changing definitions. I already feel that the term terrorist or terrorism has been weaponized to a degree by those who engage within the left-right political paradigm. Very often, I see an event where atrocities have been committed by lone, mentally ill individuals, and frequently you will see people trying to attribute those actions to terrorism, whereas in most cases, these mass killings, particularly in America, do not fit the term. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of terrorism is as follows: the calculated use of violence or threat of violence to incite fear. Terrorism is intended to coerce or intimidate governments or societies in the pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. The question we would have to ask is that does this definition, the definition that has been universally accepted to what a terrorist or terrorism is, actually match the designation that has now been assigned to Mexican drug cartels? I think it's doubtful that it does, though I'm more than willing to hear your arguments on the matter. For me, it's perfectly clear that Mexican cartels certainly do not have goals tied into ideological beliefs or religious beliefs. I think we can all agree on that much. Though they do indeed interfere with politics on a local and national level in Mexico, this much is clear, with numerous high-profile politicians over the years having been arrested and tried for corruption and being in bed with drug cartels. Mexico has also seen a high number of politicians assassinated since the turn of the 21st century. In fact, during the 2022 election season in Mexico, when Claudia Sheinbaum won her presidency, 37 politicians were assassinated leading up to the election, a truly staggering number. Cartels do indeed interfere with Mexican politics as well as public services such as the police, though they do so without having any particular political ideology or beliefs. It's just about getting political figures on side, whether that be by the means of corruption or threats, in order to be able to operate in an area with impunity, with the goal being simply to make money. If you are going to make the argument that Mexican cartels are indeed terror organizations, then I think the political argument is the strongest. But even then, I'm not sure that it meets the actual definition. Emotionally, of course, we can all very easily make the argument that drug cartels are terror groups. We've all seen the atrocities in which they have committed over the years, as well as the tactics that they use to enforce control of areas, some of which are generally very similar to already designated religious terror groups. So again, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are terror groups. Some people may think this diatribe is pointless, but I disagree. I think we should always be extremely skeptical when it comes to the changing of definitions, because it may not seem like much now, but potentially it's a slippery slope. In my opinion, a new term should be created to describe 21st century drug cartels, as in my opinion, they do not fit the traditional terrorist profile. Just for a disclaimer, in not considering cartels such as CJNG or the Sinaloa cartel to not be terrorist organizations, I'm in no way condoning what they do. In fact, what they do is as bad as more traditional terrorist organizations. They are just as violent, just as dangerous, and just as cruel. Though I believe that the motives are totally different, which in my opinion matters when we designate such groups. I am very much interested in this debate and would greatly appreciate your thoughts on this matter. I'm not even necessarily lockstep solid with my opinion on this matter, and given the right argument, I may change my mind on this issue. In fact, having asked the question on my socials, most actually seem to agree that a terrorist designation makes sense and fits the MO of cartels in Mexico. As this delves into the realm of politics, all I would ask for is civil discourse in the comments. In regards to 2025, the world of Mexican drug cartels, of course, as of right now, the dominant story will be the ongoing civil war within the Sinaloa cartel. Primarily, the war is being fought in Culiacan and the surrounding regions. Los Chapitos, a faction within Cartel de Sinaloa, led by the sons of El Chapo, are at war with La Maizes, who are led by the son of recently captured Ismael Mayo Zambada, Maito Flaco, real name Ismael Zambada Sicarios. Of course, the war is surrounding the events that led to the capture of Ismael Zambada. In a nutshell, it seems that Los Chapitos set up El Mayo Zambada and essentially handed him on a silver platter to US authorities. Since September of 2024, the war has been raging on and the bloodshed has shown no signs of slowing down. Another prominent story, also involving the Sinaloa cartel, would be the ongoing situation in the border state of Sonora, where members of Cartel de Sinaloa, loyal to Los Chapitos, namely a group known as Los Pelones, are currently engaged in a violent turf war with Los Cazadores and Los Salazar, two groups who used to be under the Sinaloa umbrella but broke away. Sonora is an incredibly important state to control the drug cartels, as it contains drug corridors heading into the United States. This is why the violence in Sonora and other border states is so incredibly high. Sonora could become a prominent story in 2025, as not only is it an incredibly violent situation, but it also may affect Los Chapitos' war with La Maizes. Potentially, they could be stretching themselves too far. It's also possible that other cartels become involved in the area due to the uncertainty. And one situation that I could see happening is La Maizes actually financially supporting Los Chapitos' rivals in Sonora. Take that as a prediction from me. Lastly, when we talk about the war pertaining to Mexico, the topic of the border is one that is at the top of most people's minds. And of course, that will continue to be the case. Though I suspect that coverage of the Mexico-Guatemala border will also start to gain more coverage, as what is going on in the border states, such as Tabasco and especially Chiapas, is staggering. Not so long ago, the states were relatively safe, though in recent years they have been invaded by a variety of cartels and gangs, have made big inroads into Tabasco, whereas Chiapas has seen the arrival of the Sinaloa cartel, elements of what was once the Gold cartel, and of course CJNG. The two states have become a priority in recent years, as this is where illegal migrants enter into Mexico to eventually get to the USA, and of course the cartels are heavily involved in people smuggling. This is a huge revenue generator for them. Whoever maintains the largest percentage of control in both states has the advantage when it comes to people trafficking. If the US-Mexico border is in fact strengthened by the presidencies of both the USA and Mexico, it may actually see a reduction of violence in Chiapas, as you would imagine people trafficking will be more risky for cartels should the US-Mexico border be stronger, which would possibly make states such as Chiapas and Tabasco less viable cartels. Though having said that, the border does also contain drug corridors from Guatemala heading into Mexico, so they will still be abused to cartels, but maybe not to the extent that they are now, which theoretically could mean a fall in violence. These are some of the key areas within the drug war that I think will be pivotal in the coming 12 months. Though political change aside, ultimately, As of right now, the situation still remains dire, with countless cartel wars still occurring throughout Mexico, and murder rates still being at an incredibly high level. So far, in 2025, there has been a steady stream of nasty videos coming out of these conflicts, and today you will cover the content in question, but nevertheless, what happens in the actual videos?
Enter a brand new world with the GMC Hummer EV. Powerful performance and revolutionary technology keep you ready for any mission. At Marvel Studios Captain America Brave New World, only theaters February 15th.
Yo, these were sold out everywhere. Then my eBay list went off. I forgot them. Felt lucky, so I looked up some more heat. Now those are on the way from the dude in Indiana. Thanks, bro. Yeah, eBay.
The first little question is one that comes out of Tabasco State, and it features torture and auto-cannibalism. Due to the bloody nature of the video, I can show next to no still imagery. In regards to what gang was responsible, that does seem unclear, but as of right now in the States, much of the violence is being committed by CJNG and a smaller group named La Baradora. Both gangs are warring in the area. The video is only very short, at around 16 seconds in length. As you play the video, you are met with a gruesome sight straight away. A man who is shirtless and has his hands tied behind his back can be seen kneeling on the ground, and he's absolutely covered in blood. The bleeding is primarily coming from the left side of the man's head, and it stains his blonde hair red. A Sicario, who is partially obscured by the camera angle, is seen standing over the victim, waving what looks to be gardening secateurs in the man's face, and on closer inspection, clenched in between the secateur blades is the victim's severed ear. The person with the cutting device insults the victim with the usual cartel slang, before he then forces the secateurs close to the victim's mouth, and he instructs the captain to eat his own ear. The torturer places the ear in the man's mouth, and the victim begins to chew. He chews hard and fast, as if he wants to get it out of the way, and you see him visually grimace as he does this, like he wants to throw up. The look of disgust as well as pain on the victim's face is apparent. Blood continues to flow from the wound, as the victim keeps chewing on his own ear, all while Sicario is berating him. As mentioned, it's likely that CJNG and La Maradora were responsible for this act. The video ends as the victim is still chewing on his ear. It's unclear as to what happened to the captain after recording, though I think it's very likely that he was murdered. The next clip is themed around the ongoing Sinaloa cartel civil war, and is much more graphic than the previous. The video shows a member of La Maiza being dispatched on by members of Los Chapitos. The victim's name was Jose Rodriguez. As well as the murder video, there is also an interrogation video, which is about 3 minutes long. As you play the interrogation, you see the victim sitting on the ground and he's wearing handcuffs. Much like is the case with most cartel videos, the setting is that of a desolate area, and the clip has been filmed during the dead of night. The interrogation reads as follows. The Sicario asks, "What's your name called?" The captain replies, "Jose Rodriguez." The Sicario asks, "Where are you from?" The captain states, "Tijuana." "How did you get to Culiacan?" the Sicario asks. "I was on work and was told that things were going to be a bit rough, but I'll be paid 15,000 pesos, the captain replies. "How did you get here from Tijuana?" the Sicario asks. "I took a bus," the captain states. "Who brought you here? Who contracted you?" the hitman interrogates. "It was on behalf of Lucas Santos Mob," states the captain. "The Lucas Mob then, which is in turn a part of the Maito Blanco Mob as well," the Sicario assumes. The hitman continues, "What other people were involved?" The captain replies, "There was a guy named Max, Jose, Maurizio, El Chema, O2, El Cholo, Carlos, Angel, and Miguel." The hitman quickly responds, "And where are these individuals at?" The captain replies, "They all abandoned their post because the pay never came through." The hitman chimes in. How exactly were you captured? And why are you here? The captain replies, I was sent out on a mission. Intrigued, the Sicario asks, what type of mission? Was it the kind of mission that you didn't want to do? The captain replies, we were supposed to call the woman's house. Where? Sicario asks aggressively. Not answering the question, the captain replies, I ended up running into the Chiquita mob. The hitman replies, so you ended up running into the Chiquita mob. Where exactly were you captured? The captain replies, in the Campo El 10. The hitman asks, what happened to the other guys in your crew? The victim responds, they all ran away. Ran away, the Sicario reiterates. I was left to fend for myself, states the captain. So they abandoned you, huh? Did he try asking for support? The captain replies, I did ask for help, but it never came through for me. So you asked for support, and it never arrived. What about the stolen vehicles that you guys were using? Where are they kept? The captain replies, I don't even have the funds for that. The hitman asks, how much were you being paid? The captain replies, I was given 3,500 pesos. How much did they initially offer you though? Sicario asks. The captain replies, I was told I'd get 15,000 pesos, but I only got 3,000. The hitman pushes, how often were you receiving these 15,000? Every 2 weeks, the captain replies. Every 2 weeks, you say? Why did you guys steal that vehicle from the Bachocos if your mom has so much money? The captain replies, that's just how things are. The hitman continues, did they at least give you funds for food, fuel and travel expenses? The captain replies, I was given provisions for some time, but even then, it was all a matter of waiting for that to come in also. How often are we talking about, Sicario asks. Every 15 days. It wasn't enough though, because there are several of us in our group. So, you are only able to collect for one pay period. What would you like to say to Maito Blanco, Lucas, or Domeno? The captain replies, don't bother lying to people claiming that things are going to be easy around here when it's not. Everyone is told that they have received so much, but instead got paid very little. We were sent into the fire in vain. Sicario inquires, what becomes of the ones that run away? They're all shot on sight, the captain responds bluntly. So whoever tries to run away from this is shot to death. Why is that though? Sicario asks. Well, they shouldn't be running away, but they're also leaving us to fend for ourselves. You were left on your own out here, and then the bloodthirsty Chiquitas captured you. The captain replies, yes, I was captured by the Chiquita mob. Arrogantly, the Sicario states, you saw firsthand how powerful my stench is out here, isn't that right? The captain replies, yes, it's dragging away on the ground here. The Sicario prompts the captain, go ahead and tell Terror. The captain states, Terror, what's his name, sends his greetings. Tell him that Barlow sends his greetings, you bitch. Let him know that Barlow is looking for him.
You know, it's really hard to come up with a new way of saying things. You think that tells you that we'll save you? Money, time, and credit.
The captain states, Barlow is looking for you. The hitman states with chest, bitch, El Barlow is looking for you. The captain reiterates this, bitch, El Barlow is looking for you. That's right, says the Sicario. The interrogation ends here. Throughout the interrogation, the victim tries his best to remain calm and stoic, but at times you audibly hear him stutter and struggle for words due to nerves and pure fear. The execution segment is shorter at 1 minute and 9 seconds in length. As you play the clip, you see the victim on his knees, though his hands are now cuffed behind his back. His shirt has also been removed, and the victim's eyes have been crudely blindfolded with duct tape. Standing behind the victim is a Sicario who is wearing combat fatigue. The Sicario and the victim have one last brief conversation, and it appears that this video is somewhat of a response to the chainsaw execution previously released by La Maizas a few weeks ago. The hitman slaps the victim in the face with his knife and states the following, go ahead and send everyone your greetings. The captain states, greetings you bitches. Another hitman chimes in, tell them that Kian sends his regards. Kian sends his regards, the captain states. Say El Beludo, a Sicario shouts. Beludo, replies the captain. A Sicario, who I think is the person filming, states, check this out. El Beludo sends his greetings. Out of nowhere, the Sicario standing behind the victim, who is holding a combat knife, ruthlessly snatches the throat of the captain, and the blade is insanely sharp. The knife instantly cuts through the man's windpipe, causing guttural breathing sounds. And then, the cardiac arteries, which cause blood to spray down the victim's chest, covering him completely. You hear the hissing of the blood as it leaks out of his body at high pressure. The victim instantly collapses to the ground into a puddle of his own blood. The person filming chimes in and says, "We sure as fuck didn't need a chainsaw for this gig." Once the victim collapses to the ground, the hitman moves in, grabs the victim by the head, and starts slicing around the entirety of his neck. Again, the blade cuts through the flesh ridiculously quickly. In the matter of a few seconds, the head is held onto the body by just the spinal cord. The sicario then uses his knife, attempting to hack through the head, causing horrible red buds as he plays his bone. The victim at this point is still trying to breathe, as you hear intermittent sounds of him sucking up his own blood into his airways as he tries to do so. The sicario struggles to hold the victim's head in place due to it being slippy because of the blood, though eventually he does manage to hack through the spinal cord, and he then places the severed head on the torso. As he places the head on the torso, it looks as if the face of the severed head actually moves slightly, possibly due to muscle spasms. It's extremely disturbing and bloody. The hitman then states, "Beludo sends his greetings. Beludo sends his greetings. Beludo sends his greetings, you son of a fucking bitch. I want to send out a shout out to Terra. You son of a bitch, I'm also looking for you. Look at this sweet little thing that I have before me. You fucking clown stink out here. Come out here and fucking confront us personally." The video ends there, at the end of the sicario's heated runs. As we can see, due to the Sinaloa cartel civil war, the blood is now flowing, and videos are seemingly being released on a more regular occurrence. We will of course cover what we have to cover as and when. But anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it, if you can enjoy this sort of content. I might sound a little different as I record this. I think I'm getting the start of a cold. It feels like I've been snorting sand. My sinuses are ridiculously painful, like I've never had this before, so God knows what's going wrong. But yeah, thank you guys for the support. It's much appreciated. If you're new here, give a like. Also in the pinned comment is the link to my Twitter, as well as my Twitch, where we stream a variety of games. So if you can check us out there as well, that would be much appreciated. But anyway, as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Why is filing your taxes with Tax USA different? Well, for starters, your federal tax return is free for everyone, no matter what. With a free offer like this, you'll often ask, so how do you make money? Well, our federal return is always free, with a free from our optional paid services, like our state tax return, which is just $20. Next, you may be asking, is Tax USA safe? Yes, we always keep your information encrypted, private, and secure. As an authorized file provider, we've securely filed over 60 million tax returns.
On the next one. Welcome back to the stern reality. Organised crime in Brazil, particularly in the context of drug trafficking, represents a complex and entrenched type issue. Within this landscape, the roles women played in drug gangs have drawn increasing scholarly and public attention. Brazilian gangs not only recruit and utilize women, but also subject them to various forms of victimization that reflect broader patterns of inequality and social marginalization. This video examines the mechanisms through which women are recruited, the roles they occupy within these criminal organizations, and the ways in which they are victimized by these same structures. The recruitment involvement of women in Brazilian drug gangs often occurs through a combination of social, economic, and personal factors. Poverty, lack of education, and limited employment opportunities frequently leave women more vulnerable to exploitation by criminal networks. The pervasive socio-economic inequality in Brazil creates an environment where involvement in drug trafficking can appear to be one of the few viable options for survival or financial stability. In many cases, these women come from the same favelas that serve as strongholds for drug gangs, making them familiar with the operations and members of these organizations from a young age. Relationships often play a pivotal role in the recruitment process. Many young women are drawn into drug gangs through romantic or family connections. The predominance of male leadership in these gangs frequently places women in subordinate roles from the outset, as they are recruited by husbands, boyfriends, brothers or fathers who are already embedded in the drug trade. Emotional manipulation and promises of protection or economic support are common tactics used to entice women into participation. Recruitment is not always voluntary. Coercion and threats are also significant factors, particularly for women who are already vulnerable due to abusive domestic environments and prior involvement with gang members. In some cases, young women and girls are groomed from adolescence, desensitized to violence, and gradually integrated into gang culture. The normalization of crime and violence within the favelas, combined with the lack of state protection or alternatives, makes resistance difficult, if not impossible, for many young women. Women's roles in Brazilian drug gangs are multifaceted and often dictated by their gender. While these roles may range from peripheral to integral within the organization, they are almost always characterized by a lack of power and agency compared to their male counterparts. In many cases, women serve in auxiliary roles that support the core operations of drug gangs. They may act as couriers, transporting drugs or weapons to evade police detection, as women are subjected to less scrutiny by law enforcement. Women are also used as intermediaries, facilitating communication between imprisoned gang leaders and active members on the outside. In this capacity, they exploit societal perceptions of femininity to operate under the radar. Women frequently undertake domestic and emotional labor within the gang structure. They may provide care for male gang members, such as cooking, cleaning, and tending to injuries, securing conflicts. These roles reflect traditional gender norms in Brazil. Although less common, some women do occupy roles that involve direct engagement in violent or high-risk activities. In recent years, Brazilian gangs have used women to conduct assassinations of targets. A small number of women have also risen to positions of leadership within drug gangs, often in the absence of male leaders due to imprisonment or death. However, even in such cases, their authority is typically contained, as ultimately the drug industry is male-dominated. Women in drug gangs are frequently objectified and subjected to sexual exploitation. Gang leaders often claim sexual access to women as a form of power and control. In some instances, women are even used as a form of currency, traded between gang members or used to secure alliances with other criminal groups. The victimization of women in Brazilian drug gangs is pervasive and multifaceted, encompassing physical, psychological, and structural dimensions. While involvement in drug gangs may offer some women a semblance of economic stability or even protection, it often comes at a high cost. Women involved in drug gangs are at significant risk of violence. This includes domestic violence perpetrated by male gang members, as well as violence enacted as a form of discipline or punishment within the gang hierarchy. Female members are often held to higher standards of behavior than their male counterparts and are subjected to brutal reprisals for perceived transgressions. The roles assigned to women in drug gangs frequently expose them to higher levels of risk without offering corresponding rewards or protections. Couriers and intermediaries, for example, are vulnerable to arrest, violence from rival gangs, and abuse from within their own organizations. Yet they are easily replaced and rarely afforded loyalty or support in times of crises. Ultimately, they are expendable. Sexual violence is a ubiquitous form of victimization of women in drug gangs. Beyond the sexual exploitation described earlier, women are often coerced into sexual relationships as means of asserting dominance. Gang cultures will boost them to higher levels of women as a structure. They may provide care for male gang members, such as cooking, cleaning, and tending to injuries sustained during conflicts. These roles reflect traditional gender norms in Brazil. Although less common, some women do occupy roles that involve direct engagement in violent or high-risk activities. In recent years, Brazilian gangs have used women to conduct assassinations on targets. A small number of women have also risen to positions of leadership within drug gangs, often in the absence of male leaders due to imprisonment or death. However, even in such cases, their authority is typically contained, as ultimately the drug industry is male-dominated. Women in drug gangs are frequently objectified and subjected to sexual exploitation. Gang leaders often claim sexual access to women as a form of power and control. In some instances, women are even used as a form of currency, traded between gang members or used to secure alliances with other criminal groups. The victimization of women in Brazilian drug gangs is pervasive and multifaceted, encompassing physical, psychological, and structural dimensions. While involvement in drug gangs may offer some women a semblance of economic stability or even protection, it often comes at a high cost. Women involved in drug gangs are at significant risk of violence. This includes domestic violence perpetrated by male gang members, as well as violence enacted as a form of discipline or punishment within the gang hierarchy. Female members are often held to higher standards of behaviour than their male counterparts and are subjected to brutal reprisals for perceived transgressions. The roles assigned to women in drug gangs frequently expose them to higher levels of risk without offering corresponding rewards or protections. Couriers and intermediaries, for example, are vulnerable to arrest, violence from rival gangs, and abuse from within their own organisations. Yet they are easily replaced and rarely afforded loyalty or support in times of crises. Ultimately, they are expendable. Sexual violence is a ubiquitous form of victimization of women in drug gangs. Beyond the sexual exploitation described earlier, women are often coerced into sexual relationships as means of asserting dominance. Gang culture's glorification of hypermasculinity and violence perpetrates these abuses with little recourse available to the victims. Women involved in drug gangs face severe legal consequences if apprehended. Due to their limited roles within the organisation, they are often unable to negotiate new sentences or plea bargains. Furthermore, their involvement within criminal organisations often stigmatises them within society, making reintegration and access to legitimate opportunities nearly impossible post-incarceration. The involvement and victimization of women in Brazilian drug gangs cannot be fully understood without examining the structural factors that sustain these dynamics. Widespread poverty and the state's failure to address the root causes of crime all contribute to this perpetuation of this cycle. Economic disparities in Brazil disproportionately affect women, particularly those in marginalized communities. The lack of access to education, healthcare, and employment opportunities creates a fertile ground for drug gangs to recruit women who see no other viable path to financial security. Cultural norms that devalue women and reinforce their subordination to men exacerbate their vulnerability to exploitation by drug gangs. These norms not only shape the roles women are assigned within gangs, but also normalise the violence and abuse they endure. The Brazilian state's approach to crime control often prioritises militarised policing over social interventions. This strategy disproportionately impacts residents of favelas, where police violence and corruption are rampant. Women and people in general in these communities are doubly victimised by the state's failure to provide security and by the gangs that fill the power vacuum. Efforts to address the involvement and victimization of women in Brazilian drug gangs must focus on both immediate and structural solutions. Investing in education, job training and social services is essential to reducing women's vulnerability to recruitment by drug gangs. Initiatives that target young women in favelas can provide alternative pathways to to economic independence and resilience against exploitation. Programs that address these specific needs and experiences of women involved in drug gangs are critical. This includes trauma-informed care for survivors, as well as legal assistance, and also rehabilitation for incarcerated women and support for reintegration into society. Reforming Brazil's policing strategies prioritize community engagement and protection over militarization can help reduce the harm inflicted on marginalized communities. Greater accountability for police corruption and abuse is also necessary to build trust between residents and law enforcement. Raising awareness about the plight of females in drug gangs can help challenge the cultural norms that perpetuate their exploitation. Advocacy efforts should emphasize the need for systemic change while amplifying the voices of women who have experienced these realities firsthand. The recruitment, utilization, and victimization of women in Brazilian drug gangs reflect broader social and structural inequalities. Addressing these issues requires a holistic approach that tackles the root causes and provides women with the tools and opportunities to escape the cycle of poverty and crime. Only through comprehensive strategies can the cycle of victimization be broken and a more equitable society realized. The reality is, women are an integral part of many drug factories across Brazil, and much like their male counterparts, they are at risk of suffering a grisly demise. Today, we will explore a selection of videos released by criminal gangs that detail the horrific executions of female victims. But nevertheless, what happens in the actual videos? The first video in question is actually described as a punishment gone wrong. What articles that are out there covering this video suggest that the perpetrators did not actually intend to kill the woman. Instead, their goal was to teach her a lesson. Though, considering the nature of said punishment, I do find that somewhat doubtful. The video was released in 2017 and has been mostly claimed to come from a variety of different countries, including India. There have been many people online that use this clip to push certain agendas, blaming other groups of people who have nothing to do with it. Ultimately, it's a video from Brazil, as can be heard from the Portuguese language spoken in the video, as well as the accent of those involved. Allegedly, the backstory behind the video is that the female victim apparently stole the phone of a man who turned out to be a gang member. I've also heard contrasting stories that the victim cheated on her partner, who again was a supposed gang member, though this claim is less prevalent than the previous. The video itself is 1 minute and 30 seconds in length. The clip has been shot during daytime in a forest location. As you play the video, you see the young woman, who looks maybe to be in her early 20s, sitting on the ground. She looks completely terrified. Multiple men can be heard talking in the background, and they instruct her to essentially place her mobile phone on the top of her head. A man coerces her to place the phone on her head. She holds it in place with her hands. She is on the verge of tears as she does this. The look of concern and terror on her face paints a picture of 1,000 words. The video is shot in a way that obscures the men, though you see that one is carrying a long, thick log. Once the woman sees the man with the log, she starts crying. The man then lifts the log over his head before he smashes it down on top of the victim's skull, crushing the phone that was resting on her head, likely also cracking her skull. What happens next is awful. The woman immediately stops crying and she begins to seize up.
What happens when you take a love of sneakers, a passion for deal making, $300 in startup capital?
A man then grabs her by the hair and punches her in the face several times. He lets her go and the woman collapses to the ground. She lays on her back and the person filming focuses on her face. She has a blank, expressionless look on her face as her eyes lose focus, and she then begins to shake. She's having a seizure. The men then start to panic, saying, "Wake up, wake up." You also hear the sounds of her breathing, which are awful. It sounds as if she is swallowing her tongue. The men shake her in a cruel attempt to wake her up, but her eyes begin to roll into the back of her skull, and her body again begins to seize up, while simultaneously shaking violently. The men begin to sound panicked at the horrific sight. The men then lift her by the arms. One is patting her back hard, seemingly trying to help her breathe. Her head then begins to twitch violently, and her eyes begin moving frantically, though they still look totally unfocused. You still hear the victim struggling to breathe. All of a sudden, she goes completely limp. The men shake her, trying to wake her up, and one lifts her head up to aid her breathing to no avail. It seems at this point, she passes away. The video ends there. The clip is an extremely disturbing watch, and very different to most videos covered on the channel. After the woman was struck with the lock, the perpetrators did seem to try to help the poor victim, maybe lending credence to the murder being accidental. But at the same time, how different did they expect this to go exactly? Smashing a huge log onto someone's head is only going to end up one way. So ultimately, this is still murder. I'm not hearing that it was manslaughter. How the clip ended up online is unknown, as is the statement of the perpetrators. I couldn't find any articles from Brazil covering this case, detailing the aftermath. Regardless, it's an extremely disturbing watch. The next clip is a slightly more recent one, believed to have been released at the beginning of the 2020s, and it depicts the execution of a woman in a forest. I have seen this clip attributed to a variety of different gangs, though one that keeps coming up surrounding this clip is Família do Norte, a gang based in northern Brazil. The video is relatively short at 1 minute and 17 seconds in length. As you play the video, you see a woman who is laying down on the rainforest ground, and she is face planted. She's wearing a blue hoodie and shorts, and at least 2 men are standing over her. The person filming, as well as another person. As you play the video, you hear the 2 men sinisterly whisper to each other, seemingly deliberating on what to do to the victim. The woman continues to lay prone on the ground, not making a single sound. The man filming then proceeds to stab the woman multiple times, in between the middle of the shoulders, as well as at the bottom of her neck, though still no movement from the woman. The other man then takes his knife or machete, it's hard to make out what it is, and then proceeds to begin hacking one of the woman's feet off, right above the ankle. Out of nowhere, the woman then springs up, sitting up slightly, asking her tormentors to stop. The person filming responds by telling her to shush in a sinister tone, a tone that doesn't fit the scene. He shushes the woman like somebody would do a crying child. She holds her bloody hands up as if to say stop, but the person filming maniacally resumes to stabbing the poor woman. She ducks back on the ground, using her hands to cover the back of her neck, but the man stabs her hands over and over, as well as in her back. The woman then begins to let out a high-pitched constant squeal before she begins crying. The cries then turn into blood-curdling screams as the person filming continues to stab away, while the other man hacks off the woman's foot. She again tries to talk to her eventual killers, but again, the man filming tells her to shush. Eventually, the woman stops making noises after some more stabs to the back of the neck, and she eventually stops moving altogether. The person filming then stops stabbing, and he hands the camera over to the other man, who is holding the woman's leg while he finishes severing the foot. You see him cut through the remaining strands of flesh and tendons that are keeping the foot attached, and he eventually slices through them. He then throws the foot on the ground next to the woman's corpse, and the video ends here. The last clip in question details the murder of 26-year-old Juliana Perez, who was killed in 2015. Juliana moved to Salvador Bahia just 7 months before her murder, having previously lived in Itabuna. Prior to her murder, she had previously been arrested for gang activity, including drug dealing, though a conclusive reason for the murder is unknown. Allegedly, Juliana was often seen around drug dealers or users, particularly in Itabuna, and it's believed she continued this behaviour in Salvador. There is also speculation that she may have become romantically involved with the wrong person. In the area of her murder, both Primeiro Comando de Capital and Comando de Melo have a heavy presence, as do a local group named Ronde do Meloso. Juliana went missing in May of 2015, and on the 15th of May of that year, several gruesome videos made the rounds on WhatsApp, which detailed her horrific demise. Her body was eventually found in a shallow grave, and her remains were identified by her sister. Following the videos being passed around on WhatsApp, they soon made their way online on various war sites. The clips since have been spliced together to make one longer cohesive video. The video itself, including all the clips, is just over 4 minutes in length, and due to the fact that it's nearly 10 years old, the quality of the footage isn't great. The video has been shot in a rainforest during daytime. As you play the clip, you are met with the horrific sight of a victim, who is essentially sitting on the ground, but a man is also sitting behind her and has her in a sleeper-choke type of hold. The camera briefly pans down, and you see the horrific injuries that Juliana has already sustained. Her legs are covered in deep gashes, possibly caused by a machete. While Juliana is being held in a sleeper hold, another man then takes a machete and repeatedly stabs her in the stomach. The person filming says, "Karma, karma," indicating that he wants the attacker to slow down. Another man then joins in and also begins to stab her in the stomach. After a few stabs, they roll Juliana over onto her stomach, and she is somehow still alive at this point, but is very groggy, making zero sounds. With her hands still tied behind her back, a man with a machete then begins ruthlessly hacking at the back of her neck, probably at least 20 times. He's striking maniacally, and again, the person filming reiterates, "Karma, karma." She is then turned over onto her back, and the front of her throat, near the Adam's apple, is then struck numerous times with the machete, causing a deep, jagged gash that leaks blood. Eventually, the killer with the machete eases off, and the person filming just focuses on Juliana as she lays on the ground. Even at this point, she looks to be still alive. She is slightly convulsing as she still tries to breathe. It is an awful sight. After a few seconds, one of the men begins to saw back and forth with his machete, attempting to cut Juliana's head off, while another stabs his machete into her stomach repeatedly. Eventually, her intestines begin to spill out of her body. Soon after, all three men who are carrying machetes begin simultaneously slicing back and forth at Juliana's neck. The sounds are horrible. You hear the machetes scraping together as this happens. The video then jump cuts, and it shows the men completely with the beheading. The person filming holds the head by one hand as he faces it to the camera, while another man repeatedly pokes the severed head in the eye with his blade. The men then talk amongst themselves, seeming happy with their work. The person filming then pans over to his left with the camera, and you see a freshly dug shallow grave. A man then drags the decapitated corpse into the grave, and then the head is thrown in. They proceed to fill the grave with dirt before the video ends. The video is extremely drawn out, and Juliana's demise is incredibly hard to watch. The video does contain numerous jump cuts, so the actual time she suffered at the hands of her killers would be much longer than the video's runtime. It's absolutely gruesome. But anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can enjoy this sort of content, as always guys, thank you for the support. It's much appreciated. If you're new here, hit subscribe, that would be great. Also, links to my other social medias are in the pinned comment. My boxing channel, my Twitter, as well as my Twitch channel. So, if you're interested in any of those, check them out. I'd be greatly appreciative. But anyway, as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Advertising's dynamic duo. We are pivoting focus to Gen Z.
Certain lighting I have been mistaken for Gen Z. We've been kind of popping burger filter.
She's good. I think it's time for a regime change. Don't want to go your fire. That this guy will be our new CEO.
Today, we'll create a friendly filter culture. I'm going to bring us back to the top. And these sharks will come swimming back.
Get 4 weeks free when you sign up for Uber One for students.
This the guy you ran off with? Yeah, I'm gonna show you also. Okay, so you're going to sort of cubicle. Yeah, I got a lot of basics on there and never mind. You know, this is a fucking cubicle.
Vigilante groups trying to expose child sex predators are popping up all over the United States.
What's driving people? Free subculture.
Hey, you guys want to see a Dead Energy drop?
Dropping up down like 20 to dropping this girl last time I went. And we'll do that leave it from.
You're live with 300 people.
I'm immersing myself in free groups to understand the real motivations behind their beliefs.
I mean, there's no race, gender, age. It could be anybody, anything.
I'm an American, where the world of online pedophile hunters
I'm not being good.
shocking live stream things are attracting to me.
Watching from Dublin, Ireland.
Bringing fame and money to this front.
He's a wild horse. He's a hero.
What's making them take the law into their own hands?
Come on, man.
And are the hunters doing it, the people they claim to protect?
For the price of only one company site in Los Angeles, you can watch these videos.
Or are they doing it for themselves?
This is the whole people coverage.
How to avoid them? I thought, what might
They go out with it.
why you do that? I don't know, I feel my life. Just keep coming. Really, just keep coming. I'm in Greenfield, Colorado. Be federal. It is fast becoming America's most prolific predator hunt.
Hey, what's up? How's it going, man? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, man. Nice to meet you. What's going on? So today we actually have 19 people that flew in from across the United States to catch a 32-year-old who's going to meet with a 13-year-old who's only waiting up. Yeah, we'll be there in about 5 minutes. So.
Right? Sure.
We on.
Tommy has amassed thousands of followers. And some of them have flown thousands of miles to watch a catch out close.
So that's what we do. Have a lot of inside and have a lot of cool. He quit on the phone for Fred.
To the Brooklyn area?
Yeah. Back to the sneaker shit.
I'm gonna have to do that.
Somebody's running all that stuff. Snag it back, baby. I'm not gonna call the police. I just want to talk to you. You want to leave it out? Look, you're the predator. I should be the one, right? I'm in the same town as you, bro. How many times have you met the 13-year-old?
Maybe last time, good.
He set up a meet and said he's going to catch up with a 13-year-old.
I'm still getting it on this.
Yes. Why are you recording it now?
I want to see it. I want to have it. Because I'm here this time. It's personal.
Is this your first in-person?
In person.
Oh, hey.
Very personal.
That's your first one?
Yes. It's a high. When you watch them get caught on the screen, yeah, it's great. It's so awesome to see it in person.
All right, guys. We got a bunch of people here. I appreciate you guys. Much love. I'm jumping off. Love you guys. Smooth. Hey, Tony. How did you do it?
Whatever.
When you're looking over, how did you feel? I just needed to get to him as fast as I could. Because if I could talk to let him know we're not here to hurt you, man. We don't even have to call the cops if you're on this, whatever. Just trying to get him to stay.
What'd you say? I won't do the call.
Because I don't have to. And you know, I never have called the cops. Oh, yeah, no. It's other people calling them. But you know what I mean? It's just triggering. You know?
How does it feel? Like all of these people and they come from different states.
And it's definitely heartwarming, man. It's amazing. All of us together like this is pretty amazing. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Tommy's relatively new to the pedophile hunting business. He set up Colorado Pet Patrol, or CPP, just 3 years ago and has carried out nearly 400 stings and got 40 convictions across the states. I'm at his home, which is also the group's HQ.
Hey, man, how you doing?
What's up, brother? How you doing? It's my little office where I do everything. They do it in magic. It's where the magic happens. You go, don't take it. Oh, you sell it? I sell it. Oh, you sell it as well? Yeah. So do you make money off of treasure hunting? I do. It used to be YouTube. Used to be huge. So from like treasure hunting on YouTube, how much would you make? Probably 100,000 a year. Why do you think so many people watch it? People like to see predators get taken off the street. When I saw it, I couldn't stop watching it because I went through it 10 years ago. You know, somebody will build me, so people get to see how many predators are actually in this little small area. Yeah, so it's dangerous. Yeah, we can put yourself in that. That's a little treat. 2 predator catches have already been shot. One was killed. Really? Yeah. What's my catch for tomorrow? It's a 44-year-old going for a 13-year-old. Really, it's like, I don't know what I expect to look like. Yes. You know, at first I expected it to look like, you know, I have a head. Yeah. It's good for you. Now they're not. That's wild. Sometimes you catch guys showing up in suits and you would never expect it. What did photo get? Which one? So one of our trolls did that, so we made a picture of it and framed it. This is Captain, this is my buddy, that's cool, they just actually kid. So what's the madness of war is when you realize someone really took the fight. That don't take 10 minutes. They dedicated tons on their clothes. Like, why clothes you? They used to say cold shit, you know. Would you say it was cold? No, would you say it? Well, I never say no. I make the final decision, but it's a group effort to get to that decision. What do we offer to these soldiers? There's a chance for them to get involved in the plan. All right, everybody, welcome to CPP decoy training. He trains people to find predators in mind.
Decoy persona. This is possibly the most important part of your decoy. Remember that you are a teenager. You will have to think and speak like a teenager. The use of emojis and internet jargon is essential, along with poor punctuation.
Once decoys find their target, there's a core group of supporters who find their whereabouts. Scum up guys, we were coming.
We're picking up the scumbag.
Yeah? But what do you think makes it good? I think there's so many more societal content.
Being able to think outside the box.
Right. So it's like a murder mystery game.
Yeah.
You get to do something good. I think I'll be a good hunter. I'll get up. Do you think there will be a time this will be your job? But then it's not coming to back to his job. From the relation to the family where it's really so what to do.
Yeah.
Is everyone still landed to make his everyone support themselves?
I know,
It's not common law.
be able to pay.
If you look at the criticism people have, they would be like, you get paid if you guys go.
Well, people think he makes all this money. He doesn't.
Do you have to real money into it?
Oh, yeah. Thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah. It's okay because it's all about commission. We do all this for the kids. We chose Tommy to do this for because he's the guy that's more like, oh man, if I were to do it, that's exactly how I would do it.
When you were young, did you always want to be some type of investigator or some type of spy? It's kind of like, it's very particular skills.
I wanted to be a rock star.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, you live in the car. Being a newcomer to the world of gun management, Tommy's attracted the attention of rival like Alex Rosen, who heads up the Houston-based organization called Predator Production.
Hey, Tommy, I got a call from 2005. They want your Echo hoodie back.
This is how to maternity hour.
Says the guy that wore the same jacket 2 months in a row.
Really? I think I have about 7 or 8 of these. I don't wear the same clothes, but this is the shit I would say.
Tommy, you told me a pedophile, so address it. Address it.
He's a fucking loser, idiot.
What? What did I do about you? Say one thing. You told me a pedo, you're weird. I'm smarter than you.
You by yourself come out of that.
And do what? We're gonna fucking square up. Oh, okay, I'll keep going. Where do you want to do it? We can go to the park and do it.
Greatness hurts. But sometimes you gotta put on your game face. That's why Tylenol provides fast, effective pain relief. That's that's care without limits. I'm crossing state lines and Tony's terribly captured innocence. Alex Rosen, an activist on the was 45 years ago. You're doing this piece right here, okay? The online thing grew up. Playing the writing, looking at the future as well as the history. Alex's rap passport to 100 convictions in 40 states so far.
Follow us on Facebook. Yes, middle-aged white lady who doesn't know what Rumble or Loaf is, who doesn't know how to cook a thing. Follow us on Facebook.
And the method of revealing incriminating details,
Be the uncle to the kid.
along with his right-wing politics. Millions of thousands. Each pay monthly subscriptions to watch videos online.
So we're becoming a member is a bit content.
And if you want to see this video, I'll censor it early. Just to get a member of bit content. Alex is advised on a monthly next catch. So he traveled 4 states to Colorado to meet him, and his current hotel in Huntsville, Indiana.
How's it going? Nice to meet you. I'm right here, right here.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. Well, you got no life all the time. I'm 23 years old right now, so I'm doing this. 23? Yeah, I know, dude. I heard a lot, but you gotta take it older than 50. Right, exactly. Which is even more. So I always want to be a police officer. Oh, you want to be a cop? Yeah, I was going to. Why did you be a cop? Because I'm 19 years old, ready 21 to graduate academy, so I'm always trying to be that first catch the bad guy. So I saw an opportunity to do it for that.
You be a cop now then?
Well, I do want to run for office one day. I do.
Well, under what
The platform would absolutely be tightening the laws on child predators, and the other platform is slashing taxes. I hate paying taxes. So, I mean, I think a lot of people
Because they slash the tax.
Yeah, you might win on that. Exactly.
So this is my first outspoken person. Okay, what about
I mean, there's no race, gender, age. It could be anybody, any income, anything.
do you get excited?
Do I get excited about doing this?
Yeah.
It's the funnest thing in the world.
I think I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
You want to put this up for them?
Oh, I should.
Just shoot.
Yeah.
Just shoot it for the team.
I'm just a package delivery guy.
It's your crew. This is the crew, yeah.
How you doing, bro? I'm good, man. Let's go head up. All right.
Alex views his work as a stepping stone to political office, which makes Tommy Fellows the opposition.
I have fun just playing mental games with Tommy. It's like verbal jujitsu, you know what I'm saying? It's not just any one group has the right to go save children. It should be everybody. I mean, we took the shit to work. I mean, we like to travel post catch the sickest. We're not just on dating apps, just trying to find people. We're trying to find child porn creators. And I think that separates us from, you know, other children.
How come you don't just get everyone to take a shit to the police?
Well, they could just sit on desk for months or even years. But if we call the police to the spot, it just puts the ball in their court immediately. When these predators admit to something like child porn, well, boom, they can't ignore that. We have this next cashier in Franklin.
So he thinks the girl is coming to his house.
But he's just getting Taco Bell right now, so bringing alcohol and Taco Bell.
He's going to protect them.
We'll see.
That's not a catch, guys.
Okay, he's leaving Taco Bell right now.
That's 2 minutes. Excited?
I had some.
He's getting traveled back right now. How does he think shit?
11. Hey, I'm coming right there. Sonny, what's on you?
Good.
Mind to get a short one nice, please? Thank you.
Money we just got to talk over there.
There's good film.
Yeah, you can just face that way, doesn't matter.
So, do you ideally know what I should talk to you about today?
I'm not real sure.
I'm just here talking to Pep all the time. So, who was all that food for? Okay. How old did she tell you she was?
15.
So, some of these messages here, I think you kind of help with this.
There's people on Telegram that are pretty crazy on there. There have been groups that you've been in, even with that app and have most of that stuff, but you keep out of there. It's not that you can do. Oh, she's probably that call. She's probably that call. We don't just walk off the property and just say we're all kosher here. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my stuff. You want to stop at the door? Okay. Is this conversation we can continue at home? No. Here, let's get the camera anyway. I'm just simply here to talk to you. This is your opportunity to actually not get looped into these people. I'd rather just talk to you, man. Mark. Mark, well, there's my phone. Oh, my gosh, guys, gotta get out of the way.